So this values work is so important that we start our clients there in session 1 of our program. Now, I do want to be honest with you. You will not always act in line with your values, and that's okay. Your moods and your symptoms are very real. They're very powerful. Your amygdala gets activated. You move out of a conscious thinking state. You move into survival, and your nervous system is going to push you into reaction instead of response. So the values are not like the answer to PMDD, the cure for PMDD. Absolutely not. That's why in the last few episodes, we talked so much about the escalation scale. We talked so much about the nervous system. We talked so much about what it feels like when you're drowning with PMDD and how you pull everyone down around you, and the whole drowning girl metaphor that's so powerful that I had it tattooed onto my body. PMDD shaped my life for 17 years before I could name it. I spent those years searching for answers, questioning my sanity, and desperately seeking treatments that actually worked. My painful journey had an unexpected twist. Helping others heal from PMDD became my life's purpose. Hi, I'm Jess, a board-certified nutritional therapist, coach, the founder of Her Mood Mentor, and your host. This is PMDD Pep Talk, a weekly reminder that your suffering is real, your experience is valid, and your future is brighter than your symptoms suggest. Each week, we're going to explore the truths about PMDD that nobody talks about. The kind of truths that shift something deep inside you and make you think, maybe there's more possible than I imagined. Whether you're in the depths of luteal darkness or riding the clarity of your follicular phase, you're exactly where you need to be. Because here's what I know for sure. Healing PMDD isn't just about managing symptoms, it's about transforming your life. This challenge, as brutal as it can be, is an invitation to know yourself more deeply and live a more joyful, purpose-filled life. PMDD might feel like your whole story, but it's just a chapter, and you get to write what comes next. Welcome to PMDD Pep Talk. Quick pep talk pause. Remember that everything we talk about here is meant to educate and inspire. Always team up with your healthcare provider for personal medical advice. All right, now let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to PMDD Pep Talk. I'm wondering if you have ever looked back at something you said or did during PMDD week and thought, that is not me. I do not even recognize her. Like you became a stranger in your own body for a few days or a couple of weeks, and then you had to come back and clean up after someone it feels like you barely know. Yep, that's common. That's a common part of living with PMDD. It's an uncomfortable part, but I'm hoping by the end of our conversation today, you're going to understand a little bit more about why PMDD makes you feel so far away from yourself. And I'm excited to share the one thing that can quietly help you come back to yourself despite PMDD. So here's what's actually happening. So PMDD, it doesn't just change how you feel, it changes how you see yourself. That dysphoric state takes your brain and it makes you feel like your thoughts are real, right? Dysphoria is the opposite of euphoria. And when you feel like your thoughts are real, you believe them. And when you believe them, you start to act like they're true, and then they become true. And we talked about this in a previous episodes, and we have a reel on Instagram about this whole idea of automatic negative thoughts. We have a whole workbook for automatic negative thoughts, but I want you to start to piece together how the thoughts really start to create your reality. And when you live with PMDD, your thoughts are very negative. There's a huge negativity bias that comes with PMDD, and so your reality becomes extremely negative. And it starts to change how you see yourself. You start to feel lost. You feel out of control. You feel like a passenger to your own life. You feel like the person making decisions for maybe up to half of the month is not really you. And when you feel that untethered from yourself, you need something to bring you back. And we're going to talk about what that something is today. That something is where we start with all of our one-to-one clients in our program. And I think it's really surprising to them when they come into session 1, and that's what we dive into, because they're thinking, I'm coming here to reduce and manage my symptoms. I'm entering a nutritional therapy program. We're going to be doing lab testing. And then I kind of like pull the rug out from under them and say, nope, we are starting with coming back to yourself. And how we're going to do that is through understanding how core values impact your symptoms and identifying your core values and starting to align more with them. So your core values are the handful of things that matter most to you right now. Your core values can change across the course of your life. Your core values in your 20s are not going to be the same that they are in your 30s or your 40s or your 50s. So you need to be reevaluating these from time to time. But your core values are how you want to treat the people that you love, what kind of person you want to be when no one is watching. Your core values are really what you're standing for, especially underneath the symptoms. And when PMDD makes you feel like a stranger in your own body, those values like disappear. You lose connection from them. And then you start to react out of the discomfort of the symptoms, and you behave in ways that go against your core values. And this is like the meat of where so much guilt and shame comes from, is when we act out of alignment with our values, because the symptoms are so uncomfortable that they make us do things that aren't like us, that aren't aligned with our core values, and then we carry all this guilt and shame. So your values really work like a compass. So they're not going to like stop PMDD from happening. They're not going to, change your symptoms per se, but they can point you back to who you are underneath all of that. And I really want to tell you kind of what this episode is, what it's not. So I'm not going to walk you through the exact process that we use with our one-to-one clients. That's something we do in our program. It's deeper work that requires attention and some guidance. But here today, I do want to show you the role that your values can play so you can start to feel the difference that they can make. And I want you to understand, how you can use them. Because once you understand them, you can start to reach for them. You can build this out for yourself. So this idea is not just something that I made up in luteal. There's a whole branch of psychology called the acceptance and commitment therapy. It's a modality in counseling that treats your values as a compass for living. Now, I did just piece this together over time, living with the experience of PMDD, seeing how it impacted me, seeing where my guilt and shame came from, connecting it back to this whole of values, feeling like the person that was behaving the way that she was behaving wasn't who I was, right? All of this was built out of my own experience, and I built it into our program years ago, before I ever knew that there was a whole branch of psychology called acceptance and commitment therapy. This is a modality in counseling. Never done it, haven't read any books on it, but I'm going to now, because I'm sure that it overlaps in certain ways to the way that we're doing the values work. But basically, if you worked with a therapist or counselor who practices acceptance and commitment therapy, they would help you use your values as a compass for living. So highly recommend. We are doing that in coaching, not through the acceptance and commitment modality, because I'm not a licensed counselor, but similar and definitely going to be some overlaps, I suspect. And we are using values as a compass for living, not as a set of rules like pass, fail, another place where you can measure yourself and feel worse about yourself. No. We're using the values as a direction to keep you steering back towards yourself, even when the symptoms are there. And actually, researchers find that living in the direction of your values is tied to a greater sense of agency and steadier emotions. So research, whole modalities around values work, Unfortunately, I had to figure this out for myself because I never had a counselor who practiced acceptance or commitment therapy, nor did I know anything about it, but highly recommend checking that out if you want to dive deeper into that realm of psychology. Kind of what we're talking about today is more the broader picture. So I want to explain the roles, the 5 different roles that values are going to play. 1, they help you find your way back to yourself. PMDD can make you feel like a stranger in your own body, and the thoughts can feel really foreign, the reactions can feel foreign, and afterward you can be left wondering, like, who was that even? What even happened? Your values are the part of you that stays the same throughout every phase of your cycle. Maybe you can't access them, maybe you can't behave in as an aligned way as you want to when your PMDD symptoms are flaring, but they're still your values. They remind you of who you are at your core, even when your symptoms are there. And when you cannot find yourself in that symptom state, you can use these values as a fixed point to come back to and remind yourself, who are you? What do you really value? They also help you break the shame cycle. So many of us carry guilt and shame about the things that we said or did during a PMDD episode. Now, in a previous podcast episode, we talked about the difference between guilt and shame. Remember, guilt is I did something wrong. Shame is I am wrong. Or guilt is I did something bad, and shame is I am bad. Now, this is where values come in. When you know your values, you can see the line between you and your symptoms and how your symptoms made you behave. You can look at your episodic behaviors and your escalated behaviors and say, that doesn't match what I value. And at the same time, that doesn't make me a bad person. But this is where a lot of guilt and shame are coming from because of this misalignment between who I am and how I'm behaving out of the discomfort of the symptoms, right? We're not really here to blame PMDD or blame you or yourself for the PMDD symptoms. That's not what it's about. But we do want to make the distinction, and we also at the same time want to acknowledge the behaviors, right? This isn't like, well, PMDD made me do it, so I'm off the hook. No, we want to take responsibility for our behaviors, but we don't want to get stuck so deeply in the behavior that the behavior represents who I am as a person. Okay? Now, this is not just a nice idea. There is research on something called self-affirmation, where people simply reflect on their core values, and it has a real effect. Reflecting on what you value broadens your sense of who you are. So the single, hard and bad moments that you experience stop feeling like the whole truth about who you are. The threat just recoils a bit. The shame kind of loses its grip, and the values start to give you a bigger and broader self-concept to stand on than just fixating on the worst thing that you did or said this cycle or during, some of your hardest PMDD months. Values also help you make decisions. So during rough weeks, small choices can feel impossible. You do this by recentering to the values where you're in the moment. Now, you're not going to do that at an 80 to 100 escalation. Go back to the previous episodes where we talk about the escalation scale and we go through what that looks like, and we talk about why it happens and how you're not able to access your conscious thinking brain, okay? Probably not going to be doing this work in a high escalation state. But when you're making choices, you're going to make the choice from what would honor my values. That one question changes everything and starts to give you some direction. And the research backs this up. That same self-affirming work shows that reflecting on your values actually improves decision-making and problem-solving when people are under stress. So your values aren't just comforting. They can help you think more clearly in the moments that you're feeling the foggiest. Maybe not your highest escalation moments, though, so keep that in mind. You kind of need to do this work before you get there. Again, we've talked about so much in previous episodes about how the biggest mistake you can make is waiting until you're symptomatic to do this work. You have to do this work before, and that's why we have our clients schedule their first session when they're not symptomatic, because we do values work in the first session. And if you're symptomatic and you're trying to do values work, it is not going to work out for you, okay? So there's just so much complexity, and there's so so much. It's actually really hard for me to try to formulate these episodes, to try to not constantly being harkening back to go listen to 7 other episodes that we did. Here are the exact episode numbers, because everything really does build on each other. So if you're up for binging PMDD Pep Talk, highly recommend, because just this values conversation today is really not enough. Okay, tangent. The 5th thing that your values are really going to help you do is feel a sense of control. PMDD can really make you feel like a passenger in your own life, like things are just happening to you. There's a lot of victim feelings dealing with these symptoms. So we want to help you get some agency and gain some control back. As you recognize your values, identify them, and start aligning with them, even imperfectly, even sloppily, it starts to hand you back some agency, which is really what you want. Women come into our program and they're like, I want to feel better. I want to reduce and manage my symptoms. No, that's not actually what they want. What they actually want is to feel some control over their life and feel like their life can be better. They want hope and they want agency. So you may not be able to control all of your symptoms all the time, but you can control whether you steer back to what matters most to you during and before and after the symptoms, come and go. And that is not a small thing. That is the difference between being carried away by the current or still kind of having your hands on the wheel. It's really the difference between you getting stuck in the PMDD cycle, building your life up, and then cutting it down every 2 weeks. The sense of agency is one of the things that researchers find grows to be bigger when people live in the direction of their values. So this values work is so important that we start our clients there in session 1 of our program. Now, I do want to be honest with you. You will not always act in line with your values, and that's okay. Your moods and your symptoms are very real. They're very powerful. Your amygdala gets activated. You move out of a conscious thinking state. You move into survival, and your nervous system is going to push you into reaction instead of response. So the values are not like the answer to PMDD, the cure for PMDD. Absolutely not. That's why in the last few episodes, we talked so much about the escalation scale. We talked so much about the nervous system. We talked so much about what it feels like when you're drowning with PMDD and how you pull everyone down around you, and the whole drowning girl metaphor that's so powerful that I had it tattooed onto my body, right? Go back and listen to those episodes. But when you are escalated, you're not going to be pulling out your values. You change your state and you write it out. But the values work is for before and after you come back up for air. So when you're fully escalated, you're probably not going to be using your values, but you're going to be using them every other time. And there's an old idea that between what happens to you and how you respond, there is space. Between what happens to you and how you respond, there is space. If you allow there to be space and you don't just immediately react. But the space is your agency. It's your power to choose. PMDD is going to shrink that space. Sometimes it closes it completely, it feels like. So your values don't magically widen that space, but they do give you somewhere to aim the second that you're aware that there is any space available. Now, the goal is not perfection. The goal is not to value your way out of having a hard week or think that the values are the answer to all of this, or, be frustrated when you don't take every action to align with your values all the time. It's sloppy. The goal is to have a guidepost to return to and to treat yourself with compassion when your symptoms pull you off course, right? The values are a lighthouse. The values are a compass. A compass doesn't keep you from going the wrong way. It just helps you find your way back. We love metaphors, don't we? That is such a good one for the values. I'm going to say that again. The compass doesn't keep you from taking a wrong turn, but it can help you to find your way back, and that's what the values are. So PMDD can make you feel like a stranger in your body, and your core values are the compass that points you back to who you really are. Values help you in 5 ways. They help you find your way back to yourself. They help you break the shame cycle by showing you the line between who you are and what is PMDD symptoms. They cut through the fog when you have a decision to make, and they make self-compassion possible. They also give you back a sense of control. So a question I want you to ponder on is, what would it look like to honor my values right now? Now, first you might have to identify your values, right? To think about what and how you're going to honor them. And if you need support with that, highly recommend working with us in our PMDD program, or seeking out a therapist who practices acceptance and commitment therapy modalities. Before we wrap up, if this episode is resonating with you, I would love it if you could take 2 seconds to support the show. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button and the subscribe so you don't miss an episode. If you're listening on a podcast app, rate and review. It takes less than a minute, and it makes a huge difference in us getting this information in front of the women who need it most. So I'm going to leave you with this. You are not the person that you become on your worst PMDD days. Okay? The person that you become is real, and she deserves compassion, but she is not who you are as a person. Who you are is tied to what you value, and that doesn't get washed away with a bad symptom day or poor behaviors, okay? It feels like it because when you repeat those behaviors over and over, it becomes your quality of life. So it is a little self-fulfilling prophecy with PMDD when this has gone on for a long time. But there's a difference here, okay? And we're using values to steer you back to yourself. So think about what your core values could be. Think about what it would take to honor your values, and see how that starts to change things for you. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this episode. Send me a DM, leave a comment on the wherever you're listening to the podcast. We'd love to hear what you're thinking about these episodes. Until next time, I hope you enjoy the wild ride that is the menstrual cycle, living with PMDD in any way that you can. And I really hope that this values conversation maybe surprised you or made you think in a different way than you had before about what is going on. All right, see you soon.